Section. Introduction. Introduction. When we train neural large language models, LLMs, on huge datasets, containing 1 trillion tokens or more, they show amazing results. But it's still unclear how this massive amount of data would help other types of language models, especially the traditional ones like N-gram language models, LLMs. So, we're curious. In the age of advanced neural LLMs, do N-gram LLMs still have a place? Our answer is a resounding yes. We believe that N-gram LLMs can still be very useful, not just for analyzing text, but also for making neural LLMs even better. However, to make them relevant today, we need to update them in 2 major ways: how much data they're trained on, and the size of N, which represents the number of words the model looks at to make predictions. To cover more data, we've expanded the training size for N-gram LLMs to 1.4 trillion tokens, matching the size of the largest text datasets available. To our knowledge, this is the biggest N-gram LLM ever created. Traditionally, N-gram models were limited to small values of N, like up to 5, because the amount of data needed grows almost exponentially with larger N. But we found significant benefits in using bigger N values. For example, with a small N, like 5, the model might not predict the next word very accurately because it's not considering enough of the context. But if we use a larger N, like 16, the predictions can get much better because the model has more context to work with. So, we've developed an N-gram LLM that doesn't limit the value of N at all, which we're calling an infinite N-gram LLM. When there's no data for a longer N-gram, we use data from shorter ones. Because these infinite N-gram estimates can be sparse, we sometimes mix them with neural LLMs to get better results. To handle this massive infinite N-gram LLM, we've built a very efficient system. Instead of creating a huge table of N-gram counts, which would be too big and slow, we use a data structure called a suffix array. This lets us quickly count N-grams and find where they occur, no matter how large N is. Our system is very efficient, taking up only 7 bytes of storage per token, and can be set up in less than 3 days using a powerful computer. It's also fast, taking less than 20 milliseconds to count an N-gram and 200 milliseconds per token for estimating probabilities and decoding. Our infinite N-gram model, which we've nicknamed Infini-gram, has given us new insights into both human-written and machine-generated text. It's quite accurate, correctly predicting the next word 47% of the time for human-written text, especially when it can use a larger context. This is much better than traditional N-gram models with a small n, which only have a 29% accuracy. The predictions from Infini-gram don't always match those from neural LLMs, which means they can complement each other and improve overall performance. In fact, mixing infinite N-gram predictions with those from neural LLMs can significantly lower the perplexity, or uncertainty, of language models, even reducing it by up to 73% compared to using neural LLMs alone. We've also looked at how well Infini-gram agrees with different methods of generating text from neural LLMs. We found that a method called nucleus sampling produces text that's most similar to human-written text, while other methods like greedy decoding show more variation, pointing out some weaknesses in how neural LLMs are trained and how they handle context. We're sharing the Infini-gram indexes for some datasets, along with the code for making inferences and building new indexes, and we plan to offer a public API service for querying Infini-gram. We hope these resources will help others analyze large text datasets more deeply and explore new approaches to language modeling. Section Summary. The section introduces the comparison between traditional N-gram language models, LLMs, and neural large language models, LLMs, trained on trillion token corpora. It emphasizes the relevance of N-gram LLMs in improving neural LLMs and highlights the need to modernize traditional N-gram LLMs by scaling up training data size and increasing the value of N. The development of an Infty-gram LLM with unbounded N and a low-latency, resource-efficient engine called Infini-gram is also discussed, showing its potential to complement and improve neural LLMs. Section. Gram LLM. Extending gram LLMs with unbounded. We're discussing a type of language model known as the N-gram language model, which is a traditional statistical approach that predicts the likelihood of a word based on the occurrence of sequences of words, or N-grams, in a dataset. To put it simply, it calculates the chance of a word appearing after a specific sequence of words by counting how often this sequence, including the word, shows up in the training data, and then dividing it by the count of the sequence alone. The value of n, which determines the length of the word sequence considered, is set in advance. When n equals 1, the sequence is just an empty string, and its count is the total number of words in the dataset. However, this straightforward method can face a problem when the sequence of words hasn't been seen before, leading to a zero count and, consequently, a calculation issue for the model's accuracy measure, perplexity. To tackle this, a technique called backoff is used, where the model reduces the value of n by 1 whenever it encounters a zero count, continuing until it finds a positive count. But this approach has its own drawback because it doesn't always produce a proper probability distribution, since the adjusted n can vary based on the word being predicted. To correct for this, further adjustments to the probabilities are needed. Historically, these models have been built using tables that record the counts of all unique n-grams found in the training data. However, these tables can become extremely large as n increases, making it impractical to work with long sequences. For instance, a table for 5-gram counts from a very large dataset could require an enormous amount of storage space. This limitation means that models typically only consider sequences up to a length of 5, which can ignore valuable longer context that could improve predictions. To address these limitations, we introduce the concept of an Infini-gram language model, which is an extension of the N-gram model where we conceptually start with an infinitely long sequence and only reduce the sequence length when necessary. Unlike the traditional backoff method, we only reduce the sequence length if the count of the sequence without the word to be predicted is 0, stopping as soon as we find a positive count. This approach ensures that we're not evaluating the model's accuracy in a way that would be unfairly penalized by zero probabilities. The effective sequence length in this model is determined by the longest sequence of words from the prompt found in the training data, plus 1. Moreover, the Infini-gram model is designed to always produce a valid probability distribution without needing the probability adjustments required by traditional backoff methods. This is because the sequence length adjustment is based solely on the words preceding the word to be predicted, ensuring that the sum of probabilities across all possible next words equals the probability of the preceding sequence. We also define a concept called sparsity for this model, where a prediction is considered sparse if the model assigns a probability of 1 to a single next word and 0 to all others, indicating a very confident prediction. Despite its advantages, the Infini-gram model can still face challenges, particularly when it assigns a 0 probability to the actual next word in the data, leading to issues in measuring its performance. To overcome this, we combine the Infini-gram model with neural language models, adjusting the influence of each model with a parameter. This combination has shown to improve performance over using neural models alone. Section summary. The N-gram LM is a statistical language model based on counting the occurrences of n-grams, but it may face sparsity issues leading to infinite perplexity. To address this, backoff techniques are used, but they may not yield a valid distribution, requiring further probability discounting. The INFTY-gram LM is a generalization of the N-gram LM, where backoff is applied only when the denominator in the probability equation is 0, and it is interpolated with neural LMs to improve perplexity compared to neural LMs alone. Section. Infini-gram. A performant engine for gram queries. We aim to enhance the utility of our system by training it on modern text corpora that contain 1 trillion tokens. However, it's not practical to create an n-gram count table without a limit on n for such large datasets, as this table would have a number of entries that grows quadratically with the size of the dataset. In this section, we talk about our Infini-gram engine that can efficiently handle n-gram, Infini-gram queries. The engine is built around a data structure known as a suffix array. We'll explain how to construct this suffix array index and use it for n-gram, Infini-gram queries. We also outline the 6 types of queries our Infini-gram can process and evaluate their response times. A suffix array is crucial for N-gram and Infini-gram language models because it helps count how many times a specific N-gram appears in the training data. This data structure is excellent for quickly finding how often a short string, the needle, appears within a much larger string, the haystack. Once the suffix array is set up for the haystack, finding any needle string takes time proportional to the length of the needle plus the logarithm of the haystack's length. A suffix array sorts all the suffixes of a string in lexicographical order. For a string of length n, the suffix array has n unique numbers, each indicating where a suffix starts, ranked by its position among all suffixes. For example, for the string abaca, the suffix array is shown in figure SA, left. We create the suffix array from the byte array of tokenized training data, figure SA, right, where documents are marked by a 4-byte ID and separated by a specific token. In this byte array, every 2 bytes stand for a token ID, assuming the total number of unique tokens is less than 65,536. With n tokens in the training data, the byte array's size is 2n bytes. The suffix array, therefore, has n entries, each pointing to a token's position in the byte array by its byte offset. All entries in the suffix array are even numbers to ensure they point to valid tokens, and every token position in the byte array is represented exactly once in the suffix array. Each pointer is stored using a certain number of bytes, depending on the size of the byte array. For datasets ranging from 2 billion to 500 billion tokens, each pointer takes up 5 bytes, making the suffix array's size 5n bytes. Thus, the total size of the tokenized data and the suffix array, which together make up the Infini-gram index, is 7n bytes. Building the suffix array can be done in linear time relative to the byte array's length. We improved an existing suffix array implementation for better efficiency and used it to build suffix arrays for a 360 billion token dataset and a 1.4 trillion token dataset. Building the suffix array for the larger dataset took about 56 hours on a machine with 80 CPUs and 512 gigabytes of RAM. Since constructing the suffix array requires a lot of random memory access, and the entire byte array needs to be in RAM to keep build times reasonable, we may run into issues if the byte array is too large for the available RAM. To solve this, we split the byte array into smaller parts, or shards, and build a suffix array for each shard. This sharding process can increase the time it takes to answer queries, but we have strategies to minimize this delay. For counting n-grams, we need to find how often a sequence of tokens appears. Since the suffix array sorts all suffixes of the training data, all instances of a sequence starting with a specific set of tokens will be grouped together in the array. We just need to find the first and last positions of these instances, and the difference gives us the count. We can find these positions using binary search, which requires time proportional to n times the logarithm of n and a logarithmic number of random memory accesses. These binary searches can be done in parallel, cutting the time needed in half. The length of the query, n, doesn't significantly affect the time because computers fetch memory in large blocks, and comparing strings is quicker than fetching these blocks. So, when we talk about how long queries take, we're mainly concerned with the number of random memory accesses. Section Summary. The section discusses the challenges of training Infini-gram on massive text corpora and introduces the Infini-gram engine, powered by a suffix array data structure, for efficient processing of n-gram, Infini-gram queries. The suffix array represents the lexicographical ordering of all suffixes of the training data and is built on the byte array of tokenized training data, with the combined size of tokenized data and suffix array being 7n bytes. Additionally, the section covers the building of the suffix array, sharding to mitigate RAM limitations, and the efficient computation of n-gram probabilities using binary search with parallelization to reduce latency. Section: Finding occurrence positions and documents. We've discovered a handy side effect when we count n-grams using suffix arrays. We also learn every place in the training data where the n-gram shows up, without any extra effort. This information about where the n-gram is found is hidden in the part of the suffix array we look at during counting. To find the original documents containing the n-gram, we just need to follow each pointer in this part of the array back to the training data and look around until we find the boundaries of the document. When it comes to handling large amounts of data, we sometimes split the data into smaller pieces, known as sharding. By building suffix arrays on these smaller pieces, we can count n-grams in each shard separately and then add up the counts from all shards. The more shards we have, the longer it takes, with the time needed growing in proportion to the number of shards. However, if we work on different shards at the same time, we can get the job done faster, bringing the time needed back down. We've also found a way to speed up n-gram calculations by reusing results from previous searches. For example, if we're looking at a sequence of words, the place where this sequence shows up in the suffix array will be within the range we found for the sequence minus the last word. So, to find out how often the full sequence appears, we only need to look for the start and end of its range within the already identified segment. This trick can cut down the time it takes by up to half. However, when our data and suffix arrays are too big to fit in the computer's memory, we store them on a disk and access them as if they were in memory. This can slow things down because searching through them requires jumping around to different parts of the file. To deal with this, we've come up with a way to tell the computer in advance which parts of the file we'll need soon, which can make things about 5 times faster. For really long n-grams, counting how often each possible ending shows up can take a lot of time, especially as we try to include as many words as possible while still having enough examples to be meaningful. We've developed a method that reduces the number of times we need to count by using a combination of 2 search techniques, which makes the whole process much more efficient. When we're working with a lot of data, we've noticed that we don't always need to calculate the probability for every single word from scratch. Since the relevant length of the n-gram for one word is usually only one word longer than for the previous word, we can save time by not starting over each time. This makes evaluating each word faster on average. Infini-gram, our system, can handle several types of queries related to n-grams and longer sequences, including counting how often an n-gram appears, calculating the probability of a word based on n-grams, and more. We've tested how quickly Infini-gram can answer these queries using a large dataset and found that it's quite fast, usually taking less than a second per query. For example, finding the probability of a word using our system takes just 135 milliseconds. We've also shown that our system can count n-grams of any length very quickly, with the time needed staying around 20 milliseconds, even for very long n-grams. However, calculating the next word's probability takes a bit longer, especially for longer sequences. Section summary. The process of counting n-grams with suffix arrays also provides the positions where the n-gram appears in the training data, which can be retrieved by following pointers within the segment back into the training data. Sharding the suffix arrays on byte arrays allows for parallelized processing, reducing the time complexity, and reusing previous search results on the suffix array can significantly reduce latency. Additionally, the use of on-disk search and memory prefetching methods can mitigate latency when dealing with large byte arrays and suffix arrays, while algorithms such as binary lifting and binary search can reduce the number of counting operations for Infini-gram computation. The system supports various types of n-gram, Infini-gram queries and demonstrates sub-second latency on trillion token training data, with specific tasks like computing token probability from the Infini-gram taking merely 135 milliseconds. Section. Analyzing human-written and machine-generated text using gram. We're diving into how well we can predict the next word in a text, whether it's written by humans or generated by machines, by using something called an Infini-gram. Here's what we found. 1. The Infini-gram is pretty good at guessing the next word in human-written texts, hitting the mark about 47% of the time. Its accuracy goes up when it can look at a longer piece of the text leading up to the word it's trying to predict. Essentially, the more context it has, the better it does. 2. Traditional methods that look at up to 5 words back, n-grams where n is 5 or less, don't do a great job because they can't see far enough back in the text to make a good guess about what comes next. Our Infini-gram method, on the other hand, is much better at predicting what comes next, whether the text is written by a person or a machine. 3. We think the Infini-gram could really help improve the way neural language models, like the ones that power AI text generators, predict human-written text. We're going to look into this more. 4. When we compared different ways of generating text with AI, we found that one method, called nucleus sampling, produces text that's most similar to something a human would write. Other methods, like greedy decoding, were less consistent, possibly because of some issues in how the AI was initially trained. For our analysis, we used a huge dataset called Pile's training set, which has 360 billion words in it, after we cleaned it up to make sure it didn't contain any of the same material we were testing it on. This cleaning process is important to make sure our tests are fair and don't just repeat what they've seen in the training data. We took a close look at 50 documents from each category in the dataset, cutting them down to 1024 words each for a manageable analysis. We then checked how often the Infini-gram's best guess for the next word matched the actual next word in these human-written texts. We found that the more of the text's recent words the Infini-gram could consider, we call this the effective N, the more accurate it was. Specifically, when it could look at 16 or more recent words, it was right over 75% of the time. Comparing this to a simpler method that only looks at the last 5 words, we saw a big difference. The simpler method didn't do nearly as well because most of the time, you need to look at more than 5 words to make a good guess about what comes next. In fact, we found that looking at about 7 to 9 words back was typical for making accurate predictions. Lastly, when the Infini-gram had a unique prediction based on the training data, it was even more likely to be right, hitting the mark 75% of the time overall and over 80% of the time when it could look at 14 or more recent words. This suggests that when the training data points strongly to a specific next word, that word is very likely to be the correct one in human-written text. Section Summary. In this section, the Infini-gram method is analyzed for predicting the next token in human-written and machine-generated text. The Infini-gram shows a high accuracy of 47% when predicting the next token in human-written text, especially with longer suffixes of the prompt. Additionally, the Infini-gram method has the potential to enhance neural language models when predicting human-written text, and it is found to be more predictive than conventional n-grams, NLI5. The analysis uses Pile's training set as training data for the Infini-gram, and decontamination is performed to prevent test leakage. The token-wise agreement between the Infini-gram's estimate and the actual human-written text is measured, showing that Infini-gram becomes more accurate with an increase in the effective N, reaching an agreement higher than 75% when the effective NGE 16. Section. Gram can shine where neural LLMs fail. We've discovered that gram models can outperform neural language models, LLMs, in certain situations. Specifically, we looked at how well the Llama 2 models and an Infini-gram model agree with the actual words used in human-written texts. We found that there's a positive relationship between the predictions of neural LLMs and the Infini-gram model, although it's not perfect. For example, even when neural LLMs don't do well, which is shown on the left side of our chart, the Infini-gram model still agrees with the actual text more than 20% of the time. This percentage can even jump to 50% for words that don't appear often. This suggests that combining neural LLMs with the Infini-gram model could significantly improve predictions for human-written text, which we explore further in our paper. In our experiments, we used 50 documents from different categories of a dataset called the Pile. We took the first 50 words from each document and asked neural LLMs to continue the text. The continuation went on until it reached the original document's length or an end-of-sentence marker was produced. We tried this with 3 different ways of generating text: greedy decoding, temperature sampling, and nucleus sampling, using various sizes of neural LLMs, including GPT-Neo, GPT-J, and different versions of Llama 2. We noticed that the way we choose to generate text affects how similar the model's behavior is to human writing. Nucleus sampling, which involves picking the next word from a smaller, more likely set of options, produced results most similar to human writing. Greedy decoding, where the model always picks the most likely next word, resulted in less diversity and more repetition of the training data. Interestingly, the agreement between the model's predictions and actual human writing varied a lot with greedy decoding, especially with smaller models. This variation was so predictable at certain points that it suggests further investigation into how these models are trained, particularly regarding their use of positional information. When we looked at how the size of the neural LM affected its performance, we found that larger models were slightly better at matching the training data and copying it exactly. However, models trained on the same dataset as our Infini-gram model, like GPT-Neo-J, agreed more with the Infini-gram predictions than the Llama 2 models did. This suggests that the choice of training data can significantly impact a model's performance. Based on these findings, we decided to combine neural LMs with the Infini-gram model to create a more powerful language model. We used two different settings for blending these models, depending on how often the words appeared in the training data. By adjusting these settings on a validation set, we were able to reduce the model's perplexity, which is a measure of how well it predicts text. Finally, we evaluated our combined model on a standard dataset, dividing the documents into manageable pieces and using a sliding window approach, which is a common practice in language modeling research. Our results show that this combined approach holds a lot of promise for improving the accuracy of language models. Section Summary. The section discusses the potential of using N-gram models to complement and enhance the performance of neural language models, LLMs, in predicting human written text. It highlights the positive correlation between neural LMs and N-gram models, especially when the neural LM performance is poor. The section also explores the impact of decoding methods and model size on the effective N-gram order and agreement level, ultimately motivating the combination of neural LMs and N-gram models to create better language models, supported by strong experimental results. Section Metric. We evaluate how well each model performs on test data by measuring their perplexity, which is a way to see how confused a model gets when predicting the next word in a sequence. We also look at how much one model improves over another by calculating the percentage of improvement towards the ideal scenario where the model predicts perfectly. Perplexity equals 1. For clarity, we'll refer to the training data used for the Infini-gram model as reference data. This includes data from two sources: the pile, which has 360 billion tokens, and Red Pajama, with 1.4 trillion tokens, making a total of 1.8 trillion tokens according to the Llama tokenizer. We'll explore how changing the size and type of this reference data affects the results. We test a variety of large, state-of-the-art neural language models, LMs, including GPT-2, GPT-Neo, GPT-J, Llama 2, and Silo, which range in size and are trained on different datasets. For instance, GPT-2 is trained on a diverse set of web text, while GPT-Neo and GPT-J are trained on the pile. Llama 2, a very competitive model, is trained on 2 trillion tokens from sources like Common Crawls and Wikipedia, similar to Red Pajama. Silo models are unique because they're trained only on data that's freely available for use, which presents a challenge since this data is often very specific to certain domains like coding or government documents. We compare these models to see how they perform and how much they can improve when combined with the Infini-gram model, which uses a massive index of text data to help predict words. Our experiments show that using the Infini-gram model significantly improves the performance of these neural LMs, especially as the size of the neural LM increases. However, the amount of improvement varies. For example, the Infini-gram model boosts the performance of the largest GPT-2 model by 34%, but a smaller GPT-Neo model only sees a 16% improvement. This difference might be because GPT-Neo and GPT-J are already trained on the pile, suggesting that the Infini-gram model is more beneficial when it adds new or complementary data to the mix. Interestingly, even when neural LLMs are trained on the same data as the Infini-gram model, we still see improvements, highlighting the consistent benefits of using the Infini-gram model. When we look at which reference data to use for the Infini-gram model, combining the pile with Red Pajama gives better results than using the pile alone, especially for the Llama 2 models. In some cases, this combination even makes a smaller Llama 2 model outperform a larger one. For the Silo model, which is trained on more restricted data, adding the Infini-gram model is particularly helpful, and the more restricted the training data, the bigger the improvement. One of the advantages of the Infini-gram model is that it allows us to trace back to the exact documents in the reference data that contributed to the language model's predictions. This aligns well with Silo's philosophy of giving credit to the original data sources. Compared to other methods that augment language models with additional data, like KNN-LM and RIC-LM, the Infini-gram model offers better improvements, making it a superior choice for enhancing Silo's performance. Section Summary. The section discusses the measurement of perplexity for language models and the relative improvement of perplexity between models. It also covers the use of various neural language models and their performance when interpolated with the Infini-gram. The results show that interpolating with Infini-gram consistently improves the perplexity of neural language models, with the amount of improvement varying based on the model size and the diversity of the reference data. Additionally, the Infini-gram is found to be a better alternative as a retrieval augmentation method for Silo compared to existing methods like KNN-LM and RIC-LM. Section. Effect of the size of the reference data. We explored how the size of the reference data affects our combined model. By making the reference data smaller, cutting it in half multiple times until it was 256 times smaller, we observed how the model's performance changed. We found that the benefits of using an Infini-gram approach become more noticeable as the size of the reference data increases. This relationship is mostly log linear, which means as you increase the size of the reference data on a logarithmic scale, the performance improves in a linear fashion. However, in the specific case of the NIH exporter domain, using an Infini-gram didn't help when the reference data was very small. When it comes to the source of the reference data, we compared using all available reference data versus just the data relevant to the specific domain we were testing on. It turns out that focusing on domain-specific data is just as effective as using the entire dataset. This suggests that the improvements we see are mainly due to the quality of the domain-specific data, which is free from irrelevant information. So, while it's okay to use all available data, especially when we're not sure about the domain or don't have domain-specific data, having that targeted data is most beneficial. We also tested our model on new data that was created after our reference data was collected, using articles from Wikipedia made in April and August 2023. This was to make sure our improvements weren't just because we hadn't fully cleaned our reference data. In most cases, adding the Infini-gram approach to a neural language model made the model perform better. We even enhanced this improvement by using a random forest to fine-tune the blending of the Infini-gram with the neural model, based on the characteristics of the text we were analyzing. This led to a 3% to 20% improvement in performance. However, when it comes to generating text freely, our initial tests show that combining Infini-grams with neural language models might not always be helpful and can sometimes cause errors. This means we're not ready to replace neural language models with this combined approach just yet and need to investigate further how to best integrate Infini-grams into text generation. In our discussion, we highlighted some potential uses for the Infini-gram tool. It can help us understand what's in our large text datasets more quickly, assist in removing unwanted content like hate speech or personal information, and help us figure out which parts of the training data influenced a model's predictions. It can also be used to check for issues like data contamination, memorization, and plagiarism in language models. Lastly, it might help in avoiding copyright issues by guiding language models away from generating content that's too similar to copyrighted material. Section Summary. The performance of the combined model improves as the size of the reference data grows, with a roughly log-linear relationship, except for the NIH exporter domain where Infini-gram doesn't help when the reference data is too small. Using in-domain reference data is almost as effective as using the full reference data, indicating that most of the improvement is due to in-domain data. Additionally, while Infini-gram can significantly improve perplexity in neural language models, it may not be beneficial for open-ended text generation tasks and requires further investigation for optimal contribution. The Infini-gram engine has broader implications, such as aiding in understanding text corpora by quickly identifying its contents using n-gram lookup, facilitating data curation by removing problematic content from corpora, and enabling attribution by tracing back to related documents in the training data of neural language models. It also has the potential to detect data contamination, memorization, plagiarism, and mitigate copyright infringement in generative AI outputs. Section: Reducing hallucination in factual knowledge. We're exploring ways to make machines understand and generate text more accurately, focusing on three main areas: reducing errors, speeding up text generation, and improving memory efficiency in language models. Firstly, we've noticed that models often make mistakes by creating information that isn't true, a problem known as hallucination. Our solution, the Infini-gram, can help by directly using information from its training data, making it less likely to produce these errors. In tests, Infini-gram performed better than a very large model called Llama 2-70B in checking facts. Secondly, we're working on making text generation faster through a method called speculative decoding. This involves using two decoders, a fast one that quickly generates parts of the text and a slow one that checks the fast one's work. The Infini-gram, thanks to its speed, could serve as the fast decoder, making the whole process more efficient. Thirdly, we're looking at ways to reduce the burden on neural models to remember a lot of factual information. Instead of forcing these models to store all this data, we can use non-parametric modules, like the Infini-gram, to handle this memorization task. This approach could make neural models more efficient and focused on understanding and generating text. We're also revisiting an older method of language modeling, the n-gram, which has been overshadowed by neural models. By significantly increasing the amount of data used for training, our version of the n-gram model, which doesn't stick to a fixed n value and is called the Infini-gram, outperforms current top neural models. This shows there's still value in older methods, especially when combined with new techniques. In addition, we've looked into using different data structures to support our Infini-gram model. While previous attempts with suffix arrays and trees had limitations, we've managed to scale up our data significantly, making our model more practical and powerful. Other methods for organizing text data include using various indexing structures to balance accuracy and efficiency. For example, some tools focus on exact or close matches in large text databases, while others use complex search engines to manage vast amounts of data. Lastly, we're pushing the boundaries of non-parametric language models, which adapt based on the data they encounter. These models are challenging to scale because they require storing a lot of information. Our Infini-gram model stands out as it uses a vast amount of reference data and a large base neural model, yet remains simpler and more resource efficient than previous attempts. We're excited about these developments and encourage the community to join us in exploring these new directions, using the tools we've made available with the Infini-gram.